Hello, it's the Great Canadian Bagel here, coming to you with the next update to the Canadian federal election forecast model. So, as anyone watching the polls has seen in the last couple of days, the Conservatives have taken the lead in voting intention polls. And just as a foreword to this, my model does not just strictly take polling data. It does forecast things like incumbency bias. It does forecast things like strategic voting and historical polling error. So my results are going to be slightly more tame than headlining polls. Keep that in mind when you're looking at it. So this is all to say, the Conservatives in my model, they are leading, but they're not as leading as much as current polling looks like, and that's largely because I'm forecasting a lot of NDP to Liberal voter strategic voting. It has happened historically to quote unquote stop a Conservative win. If that does happen, my model will accurately handle it. I might have overestimated it. I might have underestimated it. We will see. But just that, get that out of the way. So, starting here, we can see this map, and any keen-eyed viewers will know seat totals are much narrower now. Liberals have lost 11 seats, and the Conservatives have gained 7. NDP 2 and Bloc 2 since Sunday. It's been 4 days. That's a pretty big difference. So let's break it down. So let's start off in BC. BC is unchanged. Or, sorry, Conservatives lost a seat in BC, and the NDP have gained a seat in BC. But BC's is a bit of a volatile area and a lot of very close three-way or two-way ridings. So I expect this will keep flipping around the exact seat total, and even on election day, this is probably where a good amount of error is going to come. Assuming the pollsters are not incredibly wrong, because like any aggregation model like this, I can only be as good as my underlying data going into it, and I do not create any of it because I have 48 subscribers as I'm making this video, so I can't afford to pay for polling. My own polling, I should say. So, Saskatchewan is the next place that has changes. So the Liberals lost one of the seats to the Conservatives. Well, technically they lost 2 seats to the Conservatives, and the NDP picked up 1 seat from the Conservatives. I think it's Regina West went to NDP, and it was the northern Saskatchewan riding, and the other one in Saskatoon, I think. I might be mixing up Saskatoon and Regina, so I apologize, Saskatchewan folks. That one from Liberal to Conservative. In Manitoba, one of the ridings in Winnipeg, I can't remember which one, flipped from Liberal back to Conservative. To be expected, I think that was kind of an anomaly. I'm expecting Manitoba to pull strong results for the Conservative Party, so unless it's a rout for the Conservatives, I suppose. So since it's not looking like a rout, I think any result in the West, any polling result in the West of Canada suggests it's very competitive, should be taken with some salt. Moving on to Ontario, this is where a lot of stuff has happened. So the NDP picked up a seat, and the Conservatives picked up 5, all from the Liberals. The Liberals are down 6 in Ontario. I don't really remember offhand which of the ridings flipped. Basically, the Conservatives, it's mostly... So there's some GTA ridings around here, and there's some rural Ontario ridings that were occupied, or that, not occupied, were previously won by the Liberals that have flipped Conservative, which to be expected. I don't know what this NDP seat is. There's 121 ridings, and I just have a spreadsheet that prints out the results in the ridings, so somewhere. I couldn't find it. Now, moving on to Quebec. Just looking at my notes here, so the Conservatives lost a seat, and the Liberals lost a seat, and the Bloc gained those 2 seats. Conservatives are doing quite strong in Quebec, though they've really hit their upper limit. Like, I believe Beauport in Quebec City is still in play for the Conservatives, and maybe Jonquière, but Jonquier's kind of a leap. And maybe Lac Saint Jean, which is even more of a leap. I think Lac Saint Jean's like right. Saint Jean is like right here, I think. Not 100% on Quebec writings. Really, not really 100% on any writings outside of Nova Scotia, but. But that would be a big stretch. Lac Saint Jean would be like a conserv. If that happens, I think. If that flipped, I think you'll see a lot of seats flip because that's only going to happen if a blue wave hits Quebec, I think. So, moving into New Brunswick. So, no seat changes have happened in New Brunswick since the last update, but Miramichi Grand Lake is nice edge. Very close. It could go either way, and that is worth noting. And it also has a very high PPC support. It's about 7% in the model. I believe that puts them at fourth place. I'm not sure if they're ahead of the NDP. The NDP and Greens in New Brunswick split their vote pretty heavily between them. When I say split the vote between them, I mean like the Green voters and the NDP voters have like there's a Venn diagram of the two voters. It's almost one circle. There's some difference, but it's very polling wise suggests it's almost the same circle. Come Nova Scotia, the last place that has had a seat change, the Conservatives picked up Cumberland Colchester from the Liberals. It's still very close. It's just this shy of the margin of error. So I'm going to rephrase this. It's just this shy to the Conservatives. Last update, which was yesterday, on Sunday, it was very close. But Liberals were leading. So it remains to be seen if there is momentum in Atlantic Canada for the Conservatives, or it's just kind of fluctuating about. Though I would say there is a lot of ridings that the Conservatives are very competitive in. Sydney, Victoria, Cape Breton, Canso, Miramichi, Grand Lake, Fredericton, St. John's, Egmont, Avalon, Bonavista. There's a couple others. Labrador. The Conservatives are very competitive with. They're not leading, but they're competitive. And since half the game in election is turnout, and my model doesn't simulate turnout very heavily, I would expect it would not be unreasonable to see some of these seats go Conservative on election day. I don't think it's the most likely outcome, but it is very possible. And to further this will be easier. So based on a couple criteria, I have some brackets for how likely swings are going to be, and I've done some math. It's a bit rudimentary yet. I'm still refining how I want to do it. I did it one of the updates previously, but so in this update, I sat down and crunched the numbers again. So the Conservatives are in striking distance in 93 ridings that they're not leading in. The Liberals in 76, NDP in 48. So what that means is, to me, or the striking distance criteria is basically if there's a wave for that party, like they have a huge surge in voter turnout, or conversely, their main rival parties have a crash in voter turnout, this riding could go their way. So it is hypothetically possible that the Conservatives could walk away with 201 seats, or it's hypothetically possible that the Liberals could walk away with 128 seats, but it's extremely unlikely. Extremely unlikely. Possible, but extremely unlikely. So, just tamper expectations there. The block is pretty constant here. It's competitive in 16 more, so 47, which is not the most seats the block has ever won in Quebec, but that's roughly around the point where the block, when it does well, that seems to be roughly around its saturation points. That's not unexpected. NDP going to 50 or 65. Actually, that's 75. mental math. 75 would be a very good showing. Again, I think that's even more unlikely than Conservatives or Liberals getting over 200 seats. Well, sorry, majorities. Conservative getting over 200 seats only has two possible outcomes, 200 or 201, so that's extremely, extremely unlikely. So further with this metric here, I also have the predicted average best case scenario, if that makes sense. So this doesn't have a probability on it, because again, I don't bother calculating probabilities, because I don't think they mean anything, so you can't calibrate your model to them, because you can't test it. So if you can't calibrate it and you can't test it, it's meaningless to me. I've said this many times now. But the best case scenario right now for the Conservatives, and again, due to limitations of how much time I have, because I am working, I have a job, so I can't just sit down and crunch numbers every day. Though I would prefer that, but that's life. The Conservatives' best case scenario is about 147. That right now, that is likely their saturation point. 147 seems to be their upper end. Interestingly, the Liberal upper end is only 168. So the best case scenario in this election, Trudeau won't even walk away with a majority. The only reason this election's been called was so Trudeau could win a majority. So the irony that he could walk away with this election without a majority, even if he wins, it's almost impossible now, amuses me greatly. Obviously, we have 25 days, so there's plenty of time for him to turn around in the polls, turn around in the momentum. But every day it ticks on, and every single day that the Liberals slip in the polls and the Conservatives go up, every day there's a bad article for Trudeau, and every day there's at least neutral articles for O'Toole. Makes it even harder. I mean, just today he announced that we're abandoning all the Canadian citizens in Afghanistan, which is, if that's not a huge blow to his campaign, like nothing should be. That's pretty embarrassing, but that's neither here nor there. I'm not just going to discuss particular current events because that's going to make this video way too long. It's already catching past how long I want this to go. So we are going to skip to the last part here. So changes in these various lovely graphs. So as we all know, that the weeks number here is all broken because Excel hates me. So worth noting, as of today, August 26th, the Conservatives are leading. They're up by 0.3. Technically speaking, they were leading yesterday, but I consider 0.04 percentage points irrelevant. That's, first off, the first decimal place here is dubious in value. Because the polling I'm getting doesn't have a large enough sample size for the first decimal place to actually technically matter. So my model forecasting the first decimal place also doesn't strictly matter. I do it anyways because I think the rounding would make this more ambiguous. But in this case, I consider this a tie. This is a tie here. So now the Conservatives are leading ahead. And if they keep going like this, it's hard to say. Liberals have slowed down their descent, but they're still going down. They're still above 2019 levels, though. But I should note the Conservatives, as seen here, are doing much better. That's New Brunswick, much better in Ontario. In 2019, the Liberals got 41.3 and the Conservatives got 33, which is an 8.3 spread. Now they're sitting at just 5.1. Enough to win them the election, but much closer. So what we've seen basically this election is Atlantic Canada, Quebec, and Ontario, the Conservatives are doing stronger, and they're doing, and BC, but they're doing worse in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta. But in the end of the day, that's not bad for the Conservative Party because they've really only lost 3 seats out of this, and have gained 7. No. They gained 10 and lost 3, so for a net 7 to 128. So if they continue that, that could be very good. And I will also note the raw polling, every single poll either has the Conservatives and Liberals tied in Ontario, i.e. within margin of error of the poll, or the Conservatives leading on Ontario. Every single poll the last couple days. So my model still forecasts the Liberals leading because strictly of strategic voting. That is the only reason they're leading in Ontario on my poll, or my model. This is using it continually worse if the Conservatives keep doing better and the Liberals keep doing worse in Ontario. So we will see. So we move over to these graphs. Block is kind of all over the place. I don't like... Generally speaking, when you see these sinusoids here, that means a party is just kind of fluctuating around its steady state, which is probably a 6.8 right now. For the block, they're the only party that seems to be in a steady state. Greens are falling. 0.62 r squared. This equation, actually never mind. I forgot how weird Excel holds dates, so this equation doesn't strictly mean anything. People's Party going 1 up. They've kind of flatlined over the last 4 days, but I will note, if you're a People's Party supporter, even getting a result of 2.57 is pretty good news for the party. Like, sure, they haven't won a seat, but they've increased their vote share by 50%. Actually, closer to 60%. That's pretty successful performance, especially when their main rival for small parties, the Greens, have absolutely imploded. NDP here, the correlation isn't strong, but I think it's probably because a lot of these outlier points like this one and this one, I would say we ignore those two. It's pretty clear they're going up. And that seems to be mostly at the expense of the Liberals. It looks like the Liberals, as we can see in this graph, they're definitely going down, especially if you ignore some of these outliers here. They're definitely losing support, and it seems that they're losing the left flank to the NDP and the right flank to the Conservatives. And this Conservative graph, if you're a Conservative voter, this graph is beautiful. Huge correlation, huge slope. This is good. This is good news for you. If you're a Liberal, you should be scared of this graph. And if we project it here, by election day, the Conservatives could be easily getting 37% of the vote at the trajectory they're going. If they do, I don't know. But they could. Now, final graph of the day. This is seat total graph. I'm not sure if I've shown you this one. So the Liberals started with 165 at the start of the election, which is still not a majority win, so I don't know why Trudeau called it. Maybe he had better internal polling. Maybe he's an idiot. Fill in whatever blank you want. So he had a 50-seat advantage over the Conservatives on the call of the election, and that has whittled down to just 24. 50-seat advantage halved in not even in 11 days. Literally 11 days. Campaigns matter. Also, I do think, I'll get more to this on the Sunday update, I do think there was a lot of polling intentions that were not people lying, but were being misinterpreted by everybody. A lot of people were saying yes, or lean Liberal in the poll because they were happy with how Trudeau was handling the pandemic and they didn't want an election and they thought his government was doing their job the way they wanted. That doesn't necessarily mean they want to give him another mandate. There's a very big difference there, and I think a lot of people missed that in the polls. This is the election being this competitive to, at this point, a tie for a couple days now, 3 days in a row, is what I expected this entire time. I expected it to be a close election because, realistically speaking, you have this new Conservative leader, you have this new Green leader, but the bloc leader's the same, the Liberals are the same, the NDP's the same, the issues are basically the same, the electorate's only been 2 years, so it's basically the same, and the issues in the 2019 election haven't been resolved really. They were postponed because of COVID. So all of the issues that led into the 2019 result haven't fundamentally changed. The only difference is Aaron O'Toole is doing a better job than Scheer at appealing to Eastern Canadians right now. Whether this translates for the next 24 days or 25 days, we'll see, but so far he's doing better at pitching to Eastern Canadians. A bit worse at pitching to Western Canadians. Or I'm going to phrase this, prairies, because he's doing better in BC too. He's doing worse at pitching it to the prairies. We will see how this goes, but yeah, if you like the video, please like, share, subscribe below. Subscribe, comment below. I'd like to hear, last video I got a bunch of comments from people talking about their local areas. There was one person from Victoria Island, one person from PEI, and talking about how people in those areas are acting and the way they think the mood is in their riding. I'd love to see those comments. I think they're really interesting. I can't really take it into account of the model, but I do personally think that is an interesting note, and I have this model, but I also have my own head expectation of where the campaign is going, because again, the model predicts the election would be today. There's 25 days in the campaign. Where does the trajectory go? Stuff like that is very interesting to me. So, otherwise, I hope you all have a good evening, or if you watch this tomorrow, probably because it's going to be posted really late. Have a good day.